I'm really excited about today's video because I finally got my hands on a laptop I've been wanting to add to my collection for years. The PowerBook G4 Titanium. In this video, we're going to dive into everything about the PowerBook G4 Titanium. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's take a trip back to 2001. In 2001, Steve Jobs took to the stage at Macworld and, as he often did, surprised everyone with a one more thing. But this time, it was something really special. Let me start by letting Steve explain the problem that they were trying to solve.
Let's talk notebooks. We have the most powerful notebooks in the world, but they have the sex, right? They have the sex.
That's right. Steve and Apple wanted to create something that wasn't just powerful, but also had sex appeal. I know it sounds a bit funny, but I think this was a turning point for Apple that people don't talk about enough. This moment played a big role in the success Apple enjoys today. Steve realized that Apple computers couldn't just be powerful. They also needed to be attractive. This realization led to the creation of a new design style that started with the PowerBook G4 Titanium. All modern Macs can trace their design back to this laptop. It was the first Apple computer that was not only powerful, but sexy. For my PowerBook G4 Titanium, I'll start by checking out the specs and running some basic benchmarks. After that, I'll upgrade it with a new M.2 SATA drive. Once the new drive is installed, I'm going to run those same benchmark tests again and see how much faster it gets with the upgrade. After those tests, I'll install macOS 9 since this is the last PowerBook that can dual boot into both OS 10 and OS 9. Going over the specs, this is an updated version of the PowerBook G4 Titanium that was released on October 16th, 2001. This particular one has a 667 megahertz PowerPC G4 processor. You could choose between 256 megabytes or 512 megabytes of PC 133 SD RAM, and mine came with the 512 megabyte option. The graphics card is an ATI Mobility Radeon with 16 megabytes of DDR SD RAM. The display is a beautiful 15.2-inch widescreen with a resolution of 1152 by 768. For storage, it originally came with a 30 gigabyte hard drive, but as we'll see in a bit, mine has a 20 gigabyte hard drive, which must have been swapped out at some point due to the 30 gigabyte going bad. This model came with a 6X slot loading DVD drive. However, mine wasn't working, so I replaced it with a super drive from a 2006 Mac Mini. On the back, this model has a VGA port, but the next version of the Titanium PowerBook G4 switched the VGA out for DVI. It also has one FireWire 400 port, one Ethernet port, two USB 1.1 ports, S-Video out, and a 56K modem. These are the results of the benchmark tests I ran before completing the SSD upgrade. Don't worry, I'll explain the details of all the benchmarks after the upgrade is done. Before starting the M.2 SATA upgrade, I need to place the drive in the IDE adapter. I got both the 128GB M.SATA drive and the enclosure from Amazon, and you'll find links to both in the description below. To access the hard drive on the PowerBook G4 Titanium, I need to take off the back. As usual, I start by getting my iFixit toolkit, which is also linked in the description below. Then I flip the PowerBook over, take out the battery, and remove the 8 screws holding the back in place. After taking out the screws, the back came off easily, showing the DVD drive, hard drive, and airport card. I used a pry tool to take out the old hard drive. Once it was out, I transferred the screws and little rubber pieces to the new SSD. Before installing the new SSD, I used some compressed air to clean out the whole computer, especially the fan, which had a lot of dust. After cleaning, I put the new SSD back into the PowerBook, and then I decided, before closing it up, to grab a microfiber cloth with some Windex to clean the bottom of the PowerBook. After that, I reattached it. Now that everything is put back together, I went in and formatted the hard drive and did a fresh install of macOS 10.4 Tiger. For any of you wondering how to format and install a new hard drive on an older machine, I'll put a link above to a video I made on how to do this. With the new SSD installed, it's time to compare the before and after benchmarks. Looking at the Xbench scores, most remained consistent across both tests. If you're interested in a closer look, feel free to pause the video and examine them in detail. I haven't yet tested another machine that directly compares to this PowerBook. The closest would be the 2001 PowerMac Quicksilver, but it significantly outperforms this PowerBook G4 Titanium. What I really want to highlight, though, is the massive improvement from upgrading the hard drive to an SSD. The difference is remarkable. Before the upgrade, the disk test score was 14.26, but after switching to an SSD, it skyrocketed to 132.5, an 829.17% increase. That's a big number, but what does it mean in practical terms? The write speed saw a 280.66% improvement, and the read speed jumped by 291.99%. These upgrades noticeably enhance everything I do on this PowerBook. The operating system loads faster, applications open quicker, and even games start up much faster. Now let's take a look at the Cinebench 2003 scores. Both test results came out nearly identical. The CB1 CPU test, which measures how long it takes to render a scene using a single processor, gave my Titanium PowerBook a score of 60. The higher, the better. The C4D shading test, which uses Cinema 4D's shading algorithm to assess CPU performance, resulted in a score of 74. For the OpenGL SL test, which handles scene rendering using OpenGL, with Cinema 4D managing the lighting and the graphics card handling shading and transformations, my PowerBook scored 171. Finally, the OpenGL HL test, which relies entirely on the graphics card's OpenGL, gave a score of 99, reflecting the weaker graphics card for this more modern 2003 test. As mentioned earlier, I'll be installing Mac OS 9 on my PowerBook G4, giving me the ability to dual boot and run classic apps whenever needed. If you're looking for a detailed step-by-step guide to installing Mac OS 9 on any supported PowerPC Mac, I've linked my tutorial above. Since I've got OS 9 installed, it only makes sense to run the OS 9 benchmarks. Once the tests are complete, I'll compare this Mac's performance to the other OS 9 machines I've reviewed. Let's take a look at the benchmark results. I've included the total benchmark score in the table, which represents the combined results of all the tests. For OS 9, I used two programs, MacBench 5 and RaveBench. With its impressive performance, this Mac ranks as the second highest machine I've tested with these benchmarks. It's shaping up to be an excellent portable option for all my OS 9 needs. While editing this video, I got hit with a nostalgic urge: Microsoft Office. As someone who spent years using Excel, Word, and PowerPoint, I felt the need to geek out over some vintage software, specifically Microsoft Office 2001 for Mac. So bear with me while I take a little detour down memory lane and relive the early 2000s Mac Office experience with you all. Let's start with Word, where we're introduced to Max, who is a Macintosh Plus that serves as our office assistant, because obviously Macs needed their own version of Clippy. And I've got to take a moment to admire the retro 90s graphics. The memories are flooding back. Naturally, the first thing I did was type something and mess around with the fonts. That's when I remembered clip art, so I had to check out the image options. And boy, let me tell you, some of them were interesting, to say the least. Take a look at these. There's clearly an unusual focus on women for some reason. Not bad, it's just kind of strange. One image, simply titled Women, depicts a comic book style figure staring at what looks like a radioactive monitor. I couldn't stop there, so I grabbed a hilariously 90s looking computer graphic, one that Steve Jobs definitely wouldn't have approved of. And just when I thought it couldn't get weirder, I stumbled across another gem titled Business Women, which can only be described as a sort of Dr. Seuss meets Microsoft's interpretation of the modern businesswoman. Then came WordArt, because how could you not? As a final touch, I went for the classic kaboom, and it felt like the perfect way to wrap up my Word journey. I decided to skip Excel, even though it's my personal favorite, because let's be honest, it's not the most thrilling part of Office. So I went straight to PowerPoint. To finish things off, I threw together a quick presentation. Naturally, I picked the blue color scheme for the title slide and named it Office 2001 for Mac with the subtitle PowerBook G4 Titanium. Because why not? No PowerPoint presentation would be complete without some entry effects and sound effects. And now, I'd like to present you with my masterpiece. I've got to say, that presentation really stole the show. It's been a blast getting my hands on this iconic machine. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been searching for one to add to my collection for quite some time. I'm excited to keep enjoying this PowerBook for years to come. It's wild to think that after discontinuing the Titanium PowerBook in 2003, Apple didn't use Titanium again until the release of the Apple Card in 2019. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts on the Titanium PowerBook in the comments below. I'll see you all next video.